We all like to believe that we are the masters of our own lives. We wake up, we make choices, and we move through the world with a sense of agency. But imagine for a moment living in the world where your entire existence, your safety, and your future depended entirely on the mood of a single person. Imagine a world where the law wasn't a shield, but a weapon used by one individual to maintain total control. This wasn't a dystopian movie plot. It was the reality of 17th century France. In 1689, a boy named Charles Louis II was born into this world. We know him today as Montesquieu. He was born into a noble family near Bordeaux, a position that gave him a front-row seat to the machinery of power. While most people in France saw the king as a distant, godlike figure whose word was absolute, Montesquieu saw the gears turning. He saw how the rigid social order functioned, how privilege was handed out, and how easily a life could be ruined by a single signature from the throne. But Montesquieu wasn't a revolutionary in the way we usually think of them. He didn't want to burn the system down from the outside. Instead, he spent his life trying to understand why the system worked the way it did and how it could be fixed before it collapsed under its own weight. He received a classical education, diving deep into history and law, but he wasn't just looking for facts. He was looking for the secret to human freedom. After his studies, he inherited a judicial office in the Parliament of Bordeaux. This was a turning point. He wasn't just reading about justice anymore. He was the one handing it out. He sat in those cold courtrooms and watched how laws were applied. He saw how judges could be swayed by political interests and how the absolute power of the monarchy felt like a heavy blanket over the entire country. He realized that freedom didn't come from the absence of power. It came from how that power was organized. In 1721, he did something incredibly risky. He published a book called Persian Letters. He didn't put his name on it because in those days, saying the wrong thing could get you thrown into a dungeon. He used a clever trick. He wrote the book as a series of letters from two fictional travelers from Persia who were visiting France. By looking at his own country through the eyes of outsiders, he could point out the absurdity of absolute monarchy and religious intolerance without being immediately arrested. It was funny, it was biting, and it was a massive hit. It allowed people to see the cracks in the foundation of their society that they had been trained to ignore. But Montesquieu wasn't satisfied with just making fun of the problem. He wanted to find a solution. He left his comfortable life in France and began to travel. He went to Italy, Germany, and the Netherlands, but it was his time in England that changed everything. In England, he saw something that looked like a miracle compared to the French system. He saw a government where the power was split. There was a king, but there was also a parliament and a court system. They were constantly arguing and pushing back against each other. To a casual observer, it might have looked messy, but to Montesquieu, it was beautiful. He realized that English liberty didn't exist because the English people were more virtuous than the French. It existed because the system was designed to prevent any one person from having too much control. He spent nearly 20 years taking these observations and turning them into his masterpiece, The Spirit of the Laws, published in 1748. By this time, his health was failing. His eyesight was leaving him, and he was working in a race against total blindness. You can almost feel the urgency in his writing. He wasn't just theorizing. He was trying to build a blueprint for a world where people didn't have to live in fear. He argued that there are three types of power in any government: the power to make laws, the power to carry them out, and the power to judge those who break them. He famously said that when the legislative and executive powers are united in the same person, there can be no liberty. If the person who makes the laws is also the person who enforces them, they will inevitably make tyrannical laws so they can execute them in a tyrannical way. This was a radical idea. He was saying that we shouldn't trust leaders to be good people. We should assume they will be tempted by power and build a system that stops them before they can do damage. He defined freedom in a very specific way. To Montesquieu, freedom wasn't the right to do whatever you want. It was the right to feel secure. It was the peace of mind that comes from knowing the law is predictable and that no one can arbitrarily take your life or your property just because they feel like it. The reaction to his work was explosive. The Catholic Church banned it. Critics accused him of being an atheist or a traitor to his class. But the ideas were out there, and they couldn't be pulled back. His work traveled across the ocean and landed in the hands of men like James Madison and Alexander Hamilton. When they sat down to write the Constitution of the United States, Montesquieu was their guide. The entire American system of checks and balances is essentially a tribute to a nearly blind French judge who was tired of seeing people live in fear. Montesquieu died in 1755, just a few decades before the world would be set on fire by revolutions. He didn't live to see the fall of the French monarchy or the rise of modern democracies. But his legacy isn't found in statues or monuments. It is found in the very structure of the world we live in today. Every time a court strikes down an unfair law, or a legislature refuses to give a leader everything they want, Montesquieu is there. He taught us a hard truth that we still struggle with today. Power is like a liquid. It will always expand to fill every bit of space you give it. The only way to stop it is to build walls. He showed us that the best way to protect our freedom isn't to find the perfect leader, but to build the perfect cage for the power that any leader holds. It is a reminder that our security doesn't come from the kindness of those in charge, but from the strength of the limits we place upon them. In a world that often feels chaotic and uncertain, that might be the most important lesson we can ever learn.